Hey everybody, welcome to the Max Frequency Podcast, episode 6, I think, if I'm staying on top of things. Joining me this time is none other than ATP's own Casey Liss. Casey, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Max. It's good to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
You have been on my mind for this show since it launched. Which isn't to like sound...
Oh, no.
No, well, that's good, because that's when I reached out to you. And you, as I honestly think a very smart individual, said, do you have other reference work that I can like listen, other episodes to listen to, instead of just assume, me just saying, hey, come on my show. So in the end, it all worked out. You liked what you heard, at least, which makes me feel good. So thank you so much for taking your time to chat with me.
No, of course. I got burned early on in my podcasting career where I was so excited to be a guest on anyone's show for any reason that I said yes to everything. And there was one particular show that I did that I didn't do my due diligence, and it was grossly inappropriate, and it was just deeply uncomfortable the entire time I was there. And I swore to myself, under no circumstances would I ever go on a show again without having heard at least one episode. So in that sense, I'm a little bit of a diva, but it is definitely kept me safe, so to speak. And there have been only a couple of times that I've had to say no. But I am glad that is the rule, and I am appreciative that you were able to roll with it and not get too angry at me. So thank you.
No, I'm not going to get angry at anyone who says no or does their research. I love research. It's a part of everything I do. So I appreciate it. So Casey, you're one of you're a third of Accidental Tech Podcast, ATP. You also write your own apps. You write your own code, and you're also on Relay FM's Analog. Am I missing anything else that you do?
No, that's basically it. I do have a website that I used to write on a lot more than I do these days. I still write there from time to time, and I'll put a post up about this guest spot when it's released. But for the most part, my work these days and my professional output these days has been on ATP, on Analog, and via the App Store. That being said, I'm an aspiring... I don't want to say like influencer because I don't want that, but I aspire to be far more popular than I am on Instagram. And that's funny because if you look at what I post on Instagram, I don't post that often, which is probably why I'm not terribly popular. But I really admire people who have really been able to embrace Instagram and do well with it, like my co-host Mike Hurley, for example. And especially now that I've gotten myself a drone, which I think we'll be talking about a little bit later, I aspire to be a cooler kid on Instagram, which at this point probably dates me as a very old man. For all I suppose all the kids these days are somewhere else now. But nevertheless, I've been working on trying to get into like drone photography, aerial photography, and stuff like that, and try to integrate that into my Instagram. And you can find that at Casey Liss on Instagram, and throw me a follow if you don't mind. But yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, let's jump right in the drone right now because I can't think of a better segue than that. So, I think you and I both have the same drone. It's a DJI Mini 2, right?
That's right.
When did you got yours? Like a few months ago? What was this?
Shoot. I don't know. I want to say it was like February or March, something like that. I don't remember exactly when it was. It was a couple of weeks, maybe a month after it was released. So, internet friend of mine let me borrow his Mavic. What was it? Mavic Pro? I forget exactly what it was. Basically one of the big boy drones, not a Mini like I have. And you had said that you have one as well, right? So yeah. The Mini 2 is really nice, especially the Mini 2 because it's not as crippled as the Mini 1 was. But nevertheless, the big boy is not only physically much larger, but much more capable. And I had borrowed that, I want to say it was late 2018, something like that. And I loved it, but it was not the sort of thing that I felt like I wanted to spend, $1,000+ on, especially since I didn't know if I would use it really ever. Like I knew I would use it for the first month when it was all new and exciting. And then I figured, I'll never use this thing again. And so I resisted, even though I wanted one, I resisted buying one for the longest time. And then the Mini 2 came out, and the Mini 2 fixed a lot of the problems I had with the Mini 1, most especially that it was a 4K camera rather than a 2K or 2.5K. I forget exactly what the Mini 1 was. And it also, I believe the Mini 1 used Wi-Fi as its control like mechanism, if you will. And this uses the fancy pants OcuSync, which means you can fly the thing quite a bit further away than you're legally allowed to and still have a good connection. And so I decided, I'm going to go ahead and get the Mini 2. I got the Fly More kit, and I love this thing. I have used it a little bit less frequently in the last month than I did in the first couple of months I had it. But I really love this thing. And especially if you're the kind of person that can get over the fact that you are making a tremendous ruckus and people will look at you while you're doing it. The shots that you can take with it, both still and video, are really incredible. And I've been having so much fun with this thing. And I hope, especially now that the weather's warming up and the days are brighter, that I can start maybe once a week going to different places and doing a little bit of aerial photography and putting that on Instagram, among other places, because it's really been a lot of fun and I'm really enjoying it. Have you been using yours a lot, or is yours already collecting dust?
No, not collecting dust. I actually plan on flying it this weekend, but similarly, drones have always been that technology that is so cool to me, but it was really hard to justify the cost to get into it. But I have a freelance side gig that I actually do with my dad. We film construction training and whatnot for different job sites. And the client for the job that we're working on now came to my dad and said, we want some drone footage of the job site. We want aerial footage of this space. Can you do that? And so I got the green light to buy a drone. I got the green light.
Nice.
When my dad said we may need a drone for work, I got so excited.
I'm on it. Don't worry about it.
He was like, I was like, I already know what we're buying, which one to buy, all this stuff. Because the Mini 2 had fairly recently come out and kind of met, I thought, definitely beginner's levels abilities, and just the technical level of 4K. I believe it has a 3-axis gimbal, if I'm not mistaken, instead of a 2. So I knew even when I'm bad, that it could hopefully make up for a lot of my mistakes. So
indeed,
I've had it for about a month now, and that part of it is done, like the businessy side of it, which makes it far more interesting from like a legal perspective. I dove into that, and it's a whole journey, because the drone's 249 grams, which is 1 gram underneath what it needs to be registered with the FAA, which is just $5. But the business side of it gets a little bit, you need to be aware of what airspace you're in. And I went down a rabbit hole on that. YouTube now is recommending me a ton of like legal drone videos. That is, the algorithm hasn't panned back out to what I normally watch.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I've been looking into getting my Part 107 so that if the occasion arises for me to do something for money, that I can legally do so.
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet. I've been telling myself that as a reward for shipping an app that I'm currently working on that has been taking me far longer than it should to complete, I've been telling myself that whenever it ships, regardless of if it makes any money at all, that's when I'll allow myself to do the Part 107 like study course and go ahead and get certified, such that the FAA won't stomp on me if I do this for commercial reasons. And I haven't had the occasion to do it for commercial reasons yet, but I can totally see, like, what if a friend wants to sell their house? And if I run over there, and even if I don't take money for sending them footage or, pictures of their home, my limited understanding is that I can get in some pretty deep trouble with the FAA because I'm doing something commercially without having the appropriate licensure. So it's something I'm looking at, and I have picked out, although I don't remember the name of it, I picked out the course I think I want to take, like the study, thing that I want to do, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. And so I hope to do that soon. But I tell you what, having a drone, I know this is so cliche and so silly, but it really does change your perspective on things. And if I'm sitting at home watching TV after the kids are in bed, one of the things I'll do from time to time is I'll get on Apple Maps and I'll go into satellite view, and I'll just pan around my local area, and I've created, what do they call it, like a collection or something?
Yeah.
Where you basically save a series of locations, and I've created a collection that I call Drone Ideas. And looking at it now, I have 18 different locations of things that I might want to try to take photos of with the drone. And I haven't really had the occasion to cross any off the list yet, but the idea is, if I have a morning or something when I don't have a lot of work that I need to worry about, then I can, just pick a a random location from my collection in Apple Maps and go fly and see what I think and see if I can get something good from it. And just having that change in perspective, again, as cliche as it sounds, has been a lot of fun, and I'm really, really enjoying it so far.
That's actually a really great idea, because so I've transitioned from, I got it for the one gig. Now I want to play with it. You know, I want to fly around my area and see what's going on. I did some of my practice stuff. I took it out to a park, you know, and I flew it up. I've been going to this park, you know, regularly for years now. We play Ultimate Frisbee. And I flew it up 300, 400 feet over these houses that are along the park, over these trees. And I went, when did a lake get back there? Like, just on this level, I've been going for years. I never knew there was a lake on the other side of the road. I mean, I might steal that idea, because there's so many places in Florida I feel like I could go, depending on the airspace, to take pictures and stuff. And I never thought of airspace before. Now I have like 3 apps on my phone that tell me all these different things, and I can see circles and all that stuff. It really does.
And part of Part 107 is learning more about that, because my limited understanding, having briefly looked into it, is that you're expected to have a basic, like, general aviation pilot's level of understanding of I forget the term for it, but basically airspace maps, and you're supposed to be able to digest and understand what those are. And yeah, you know, especially in Florida. So I haven't had the occasion to go to Florida in a couple of years now, but my grandparents, as with many people's grandparents, lived in Boca Raton for a long time, and I know that southeastern Florida, at least, was extremely flat, which in some ways is kind of terrible. But in the case of a drone, that means you have visibility forever, which I can see being super, super fun and super interesting. I live in the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia, and I'm far enough away that, you know, it takes a while to get downtown. Not egregiously so, but, you know, it's more than just a couple of minutes by car. And on a clear day, if I get the drone up to, you know, the limit, which is about a little shy of 400 feet, on a very clear day, I can see the Richmond skyline off in the distance, which is super cool, because it does not feel like it's close enough that I should be able to see it. So it's a lot of fun. And yeah, you should definitely steal the idea of just cruising around in Apple Maps and, you know, building up a list of places you want to check out.
Oh, I will. I definitely will. And when I show it to people, they're like, I took it over to my in-laws, and we flew it up by their house, and their house is like a green roof, and everyone around them is like black and all this stuff. You can see their house. They loved it. It's so cool.
Yeah.
I have a lot of fun with
neat.
it. I wanted to, so when prepping for the show, I was listening to Analog. I listened to some older episodes, and ATP I listen to weekly. Maybe not obvious to you, but I do listen weekly. Even drank out of my ATP mug this morning, because I knew we were doing this today.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes. I love that. It's my favorite mug. It's on the shelf. Anyway, when I was prepping for all this, I listened to the most recent, or semi-most recent episode of Analog, and you and Mike talked about Formula One and Drive, the show on Netflix, Drive to Survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say now, before we talk about this, thank you. Because
is that sarcastic or not sarcastic?
No, that is no sarcasm at all. I've heard about Formula One like offhandedly for years, and then maybe the past year or two I've heard about Drive to Survive. But this most recent time in your discussion kind of pushed me over the edge of, I'll check this out. Casey, I am hooked.
Oh, I know. Tell me about it. It's such a great television show. So my backstory is despite being an absolute gearhead, petrolhead, whatever you want to say, you know, a person who loves cars since I could walk. Like I recently, my parents sent me a video of me explaining how a turbocharger worked when I was like 4 years old. And of course my explanation is riddled with errors, but nevertheless, you can tell like what I was interested in at 4 years old. I've loved cars my entire life. I've never really been into car racing. It's just never really done much for me, particularly NASCAR being largely circles, like, whatever.
I'm the same.
That's cool, but, you know, it never did much for me. And when I was in college, which is quite a long time ago now, but when I was in college, the same guy that introduced me to Top Gear, which for a long time was my favorite TV show in the world, he was a huge F1 fan. And this was at the time when being an American F1 fan was like super weird. And finding F1 coverage was extremely difficult. And he would tell me all the time, it's so good. You got to watch it. It's so good. You got to watch it. But I don't know if they've changed the air times of these, when these races are raced or something, but my recollection was like, he was getting up at 2 a.m. to watch these races on a not irregular basis. And I was like, oh no, I am out. No, thank you. And he'd been needling me for years, literally, a couple of decades now, that I should try F1. It just never stuck. I never really got it. And a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I watched the race in Austin, and I was like, oh, that's neat. That's kind of cool, but whatever. And I never really looked back. And then I don't remember who it was that told me about Drive to Survive, but somebody, it might have been Mike, might have been somebody else, said, you've got to watch Drive to Survive. It's so good. It's like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I watched the first and second seasons, I believe, of Drive to Survive, and they are phenomenal. And what I love about Drive to Survive is that, for better or worse, it shows you, and some would argue fabricates, but in my opinion, shows you a lot of the drama that goes on off track that you don't really see. And it helped me anyway to understand what makes these drivers tick and what the kind of backstory is. Because in your average race day, they're not going to take the time to explain the history of Red Bull and how they used to be phenomenal and now they're not quite as phenomenal, or how, Ferrari won forever with Schumacher, but they haven't won anything in a long time. And I might be getting these details a little wrong, but you get my point.
Sounds about right to me.
Yeah. And so they're not going to do that in the middle of a race. They might give you the super, super short version, but they're not going to give you the extended cut, if you will. And what I loved about Drive to Survive was it gave you that extended cut, and it set you up for the F1 season that was about to start. And so I got really into it, and I watched almost all the races last year, I believe. And then right before this F1 season started, I told Erin, my wife, I was like, hey, I'm going to watch the show. And she had kind of sort of paid attention to it when I watched it previously, but what was maybe like reading at the same time or doing something else at the same time. And this time I was like, you should watch it with me. I think you'll enjoy it. And she was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And she loved it. And so now it's gone from me saying, all right, guys, it's Sunday morning, it's race day. Now it's, she's saying to me, oh, what time's the race this weekend? Which is great. And I love it. And it's something new that we can share together, which is also great. Somewhat disappointingly, however, my 6-year-old Declan, he was really into it last year, and this year just can't be bothered. And I'm not really sure why or how that happened, which is a little bit of a bummer. But nonetheless, if you're at all interested in F1, I personally believe that Drive to Survive is an unbelievable way to get you into it. And as someone who is an engineer, as someone who loves cars, as someone who loves technology, I wanted to like F1. I was set up to love F1, but it wasn't until I watched Drive to Survive that it really clicked.
We have similar and unsimilar, we have connection points there in our stories that are similar. So I was born and raised in Indiana, not far from Indianapolis at all.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Up until I was 12 years old when we moved. And I didn't understand NASCAR. I was like, they just drive in a circle. That's never clicked with me. So even though I grew up right outside of, the Indy 500, none of this ever connected. And so then I decided to watch Drive to Survive, and everything just clicked in my brain, where I love that it's 20 racers to a team, and that they're teams, so they're working toward, getting everyone to the top. But then these individual drivers are also competing against each other. And then they make their contracts end, or they get fired and they leave and they get traded around. So I'm at the tail end of season 2 now. And there was this, was it Piersley? He was put onto Toro Rosso from Red Bull, and the Toro Rosso guy was brought up to Red Bull. And this stuff's blowing my mind.
Oh, is that Pierre Gasly?
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, Pierre Gasly. And I actually think he's now an Indy 500 driver. So part of me is now trying to avoid current spoilers or spoilers in the TV sense, because I want to finish season 3 and then maybe hop into the middle of this season of F1. And it has just been so much fun. There's 200 miles an hour and they're the open wheels, and it blows my mind that they can crash and walk away from it. And
you don't even know what you're getting into, because this past season with Roman Grosjean's absolutely horrific crash toward the end of the season. The coverage of that on Drive to Survive, I thought was good, but not stellar. But nevertheless, I wanted kind of I don't know, like a retrospective, or not a retrospective, but like I wanted them to like go and dig into what happened, where it went wrong, how it went wrong, etc. And they didn't really do much of that. It was more the human interest thing, which does fit Drive to Survive. But nevertheless, I kind of wanted to nerd out about it a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Drive to Survive tells you the human side of what on the surface seems like a very inhuman sport. And that's what I loved so much about it. And it's funny you talk about, being in or around Indy. When I was little, well, basically my entire life, my dad worked for IBM, and we moved every couple of years. And we spent a couple of years in Springfield, Illinois, and a couple of years in Naperville, Illinois. And one of my favorite memories as a kid was my dad and I would go to qualifying for the Indy race, for the Indy 500. And the Indianapolis 500 and the IndyCar race there. And we would go to qualifying. Typically, we didn't usually go to the race. And I remember vividly, we would get up at like 3 a.m. or something like that to drive out to Indianapolis in order to see qualifying. And we would go for the day and then come back. And I remember this may not be an interesting story to anyone but me, but we were driving, and on a lark, my dad put on the New York City area 8:80 a.m. like news radio.
Okay.
And even though we were in either Illinois or Indianapolis, literally halfway across the country, I guess because everyone was passed out, there wasn't a lot of interference. This was also 30 years ago. We actually were able to get a New York City radio station on the way to Indianapolis, from Illinois, which I thought was the craziest and coolest thing I had ever seen in my life.
That sounds crazy to me, and we live in a day of satellite radio, and
right, exactly,
that sounds wild to me in general.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was that same trip, but one of the 2 or 3 trips we made, I had a brush with death because I was in the pits, and I believe it was Michael Andretti, not Mario, but Michael Andretti was riding around on like a moped or something like that, and darn near ran me over. And so that's my claim to fame. I was almost run over by Michael Andretti as like a 5-year-old. That's
both kind of scary and also really cool.
Right. That's exactly right. Yep.
So my wife Abby, she doesn't like driving to work. Traffic and stuff makes her anxious. Driving is not her thing. Stresses her out quite a bit. So when I told her that she should try this show, she quickly did not enjoy it. Because the idea of going that fast and that tight freaks her out. Yep. So I don't have a friend yet to like watch and do all this with, but there is a race actually on my birthday weekend this year. So my goal is to finish up through season 3 here before the weekend of the 5th in June. So I got a month, and then hopefully I can watch live and be caught up. I'm so very, very excited.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that, if the world gets to some modicum of normalcy, sometime in the next year or two, I'd really love to visit like Montreal or Austin, or Miami has been announced as getting a race sometime in the next couple of years. Yes, actually,
I saw that.
So I would love to. Yeah, I would love to go down to Miami. I've been to Miami a couple times, and to be completely honest, I didn't particularly care for it, but
you're not alone.
It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if I was in the wrong part of Miami, or was not in the right state of mind for Miami, or perhaps am not worth near enough money for Miami, or maybe all of the above. But nevertheless, I would love to try Miami again in a general sense. Swinging down through Disney would also work out real well for me because I'm a big Disney World fan. But yeah, I'd love to go, and I'm already starting to needle Mike and say, hey, we should go to a race together. Of course, it would be absurd for him to fly across the ocean to go to one of the like 3 races in North America instead of one of the like 9 or 10 or 15 that are over near him. But here we are. So we'll see what happens. No guarantees. But I'm already starting to get him on board with like a 2022 race trip or something like that.
We'll see if he comes to Florida. Then you could, he did Disneyland a few years ago.
I like the way you think.
Disney World, and then the race. You got to entice him.
I can show him. I can show him a real Disney park, not that ridiculousness out in California.
We have 4 real ones here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It is. So there's one more thing about F1. It's just, so I'm sharing this new love with everyone. I'm like, guys, F1's amazing. Everyone needs to watch it. I'm trying to preach the gospel over here. And
right.
I had told my dad this, and he's like, I can't believe it. What, you grew up right next to 500? How is this like? But I hadn't talked to my mom yet, and so today I called her and talked to my mom, and she brought up, she's like, I hear you're into F1. Like, how did this happen? And I shared the whole spiel with her, and she goes, do you know my F1 story? I'm like, no, what? How is this possible? Turns out that in Indianapolis, apparently, this is all new to me, there was F1 from like 2000 to 2007 or something.
Oh, no way.
In 2000, that was kind of the big inaugural, I think it may, if my Googling was correct today, was the first time it was back in the States after so many years, whatever. It's a big deal. Apparently my mom and two of her friends were at the race in like this Ferrari premium section, thanks to one of her friend's husbands who worked and like got them a deal or whatever. And they were there for the food. They didn't even know how big of a deal it was. They didn't understand she tells me they were there for the food. They're eating like these shrimp. All she remembers is the shrimp and all this. She's telling me this today, and I'm like, there's a missed opportunity. I could have fallen in love.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's brutal. I mean, these are the sorts of things that you can't really fault mom for it. And you can't.
I showed no interest in driving.
Right, exactly. It's just what are you going to do? You just don't understand at the time. And that's the way I was. If I had listened to my friend, I would have had 20 years of F1 knowledge under my belts, but it didn't click. It didn't work for me until it did.
I really don't think it would have clicked I really do think this human element and kind of understanding the inner workings of these teams and these racers really has lent itself. Because I feel like now when I watch an actual, like a race, I'm going to know, oh, that's Max Verstappen. That's Lewis Hamilton.
Yep.
That's Daniel Ricciardo. Like, I know at least their personalities on some level of what they've presented. I can't wait. I'm so excited. But she told me that story today, and I thought, this is perfect timing. Now I have a funny story to share. So
that is quite amusing.
But speaking of racing, there was an episode of ATP, episode 403, a VCR for the internet. I think John said that. If it sounds like a John
Probably.
thing. Anyway, you brought up that you had bought for your kids this Mario Kart home circuit, like RC car that paired with the Switch. I love games. I have an obscene amount of them. I've been writing about them it's just a part of my life in a huge way. But I don't have one of these things. And I wanted to know if you guys are still using it. Like, what is having this around? Like, does Declan still play with it?
Not really, but that's not entirely unusual, especially at that age. He's very fickle, and I don't know. He's our eldest, and so I'm not sure how much of this is Declan and how much of this is just kids in general. But one way or another, be it unique to him or otherwise, he will obsess and perseverate over a particular toy and carry it around constantly, play with it constantly, and then drop it like it's last year's cool thing just spontaneously. And with home circuit, it is phenomenally cool. And as a technology demo, it is one of the cooler things I've seen in a long time. I don't remember how much we paid for it. I want to say it was $100 or something like that, which is not a little bit of money. I mean, it's a lot of money, but for $100, if you can afford it, I still think it's worth trying. And even better, if you have a person that that you can be around that has a Switch and is willing to pony up $100 of their own dollars, you can get one of, each of you can have one and you can race each other.
Yeah.
And I've not tried this yet. We only have the one, and, we've been allergic to the indoors for the last year and change. So it's not like we're going over to a friend's house to try it out. But, now that Aaron and I are we're knocking on the door of fully vaccinated, we're hopeful that maybe we can start visiting with people again.
Yeah.
And if so, maybe we can start doing like races and stuff. The technology, I cannot overstate how cool it is.
Yeah.
And watching Mario race through your own house, or Luigi race through your own house, is the coolest thing I have seen in a very long time. In the same way that the Wii was extremely revolutionary, like whether you like it or hate it, it was extremely revolutionary. And like I will always remember playing Wii Sports and thinking, this is the future. You know, how can we not do this forever? And I mean, obviously that's not exactly how it worked out, but it was just such a earth-shattering experience. And in the same way, you know, even VR from 20, 30 years ago is mind-boggling. And I haven't personally tried any of the modern day VR, but even VR from forever ago is intense. And I've heard that modern VR, like, you know, with the Oculus Rift and all that, I've heard it's a whole nother level.
It is.
And this is probably not apples to apples, but nevertheless, it is extremely cool to see. The implementation leaves a little to be desired. In particular, I believe the communication protocol between the RC car and the Switch, I think, is Bluetooth, which means the range is not stellar.
Right.
And that's really tough because you basically are limited to the room that the Switch is in, unless you happen to have like the most open floor plan, you know, house or apartment that's ever been built. But nevertheless, it does work extremely well as long as you stay within the you know, kind of guidelines that it gives you, and it's a lot of fun, and it's something as silly as, you know, I'm a big Mario Kart person. I've always, I don't play games much anymore, but when I did, I was huge into Nintendo. And, you know, in Mario Kart, one of the things about it is, you know, you drift all the time, and that's how you go faster around turns and so on. And one of the things you can do is drift your RC car. And really what that means is I think it just changes the angle that you're allowed to steer it at. But it has the same effect, and it's just so cool. And when you use a mushroom, the RC car legitimately speeds up. You know, you are really interacting with the real world in a way that I haven't seen in a video game before, and it is incredibly cool.
It strikes me as one of, I think Wii Sports is a good analogy of just, it gives some sort of tactility to it, like it's a real object in some way that translates to what you're seeing on screen. And I think Mario Kart's a perfect place to start for that kind of thing, where you know, I think most people have played Mario Kart one version or another. On some people are aware of it. I mean, it's on mobile devices now. I did freelance wiki work for that game for a few months. Mario Kart's pretty synonymous with gaming and karts and stuff. And seeing that as a physical RC car with the Switch, which is tremendously popular, they're on track for, you know, Wii sales numbers here, and in half the time, it's wild. I think their earnings is next week, but that's a bit too much. It's just, there's so I think another kind of cool example of this, I know John has one, a PlayStation 5, but I don't know if you do or have had a chance to see one or try one.
No.
So the controller has basically haptic motors in it, but kind of on this next level where you can feel every PS5 comes with a game installed on it, similar to how every Wii came with Wii Sports. It's called Astrobot's Playroom. And, you know, it's essentially a really fun game / demo for the controller and the technology. And these haptics, like you walk on a metal surface and you kind of feel like the tink of metal or glass or sand, cool. And you can feel the sand, or you walk into a fan blowing sand and you feel kind of like grainy sand coming through the controller. A new game just came out. It's called Returnal. It's like a space game, but on this planet it rains, and you can feel the drops of rain, like individual drops. Oh, wow. And I think just having some sort of physical element really can make games more exciting and more immersive. And I think this is interesting to have these RC cars. I wonder if, I kind of hope they expand it in some way or add new toys or elements to it, because I feel like it's a good idea, but it does have that like $100 buy-in just to get the car and the game. I feel like maybe there's a possibility there, but it just seems so fun. I was curious how, you know, Declan is how old is he? 6-ish?
He's six and a half actually, but yeah.
Like that age range I feel like is a good spot for that kind of, just in general, that kind of toy and game.
It is. And I think what'll end up happening is sometime in the next like month or two, he'll see Mario sitting there and be like, oh, let's set up a race course for, you know, home circuit. And then he'll play with it for like a week or two, and then it'll go away again. But it is extremely cool. And, you know, again, I'm dating myself as an old man now, but when I was a kid, I will never forget the first time I got and plugged in a Rumble Pack into the Nintendo 64. And it was, as a Nintendo family, it was unreal feeling the controller vibrate in what at the time felt like absolute precision. Looking back on it, it was garbage, but at the time it felt like
throwing a battery and it just starts shaking.
Yeah, it was unreal in using. I don't remember what the first couple of games were that used it. I want to say maybe Star Fox.
Star Fox 64.
Okay, there you go. And I think GoldenEye might have used it as well. And so you feel, your gun firing when you're playing GoldenEye. You feel, your ship vibrating when you get hit in Star Fox. And so much of that was so transformative. And I think that what we're seeing with Home Circuit, in some ways, it's kind of like a technology demo. I don't mean to sell it short. It's just you can tell that it's a version 1 of something. But this whole idea of like this augmented reality gaming, I can see how it would be extremely cool. I mean, hey, look at Pokemon Go. I mean, that you could argue it's a different cut from the same cloth, and obviously that was and I guess still is exceptionally popular.
It is huge.
I don't know. I haven't experienced VR, and it sounds like you have. So maybe you can tell me that that's a whole new world and a whole nother level.
It is. So the tech that I was just talking about in the PS5 controller, those haptics, it also really quick has like how would I describe it? Reactive triggers, where triggers can have force to them. So if you're pulling like a bowstring, it can be slightly harder to press. So you kind of give it.
Oh, that's cool.
So Sony, they have their PlayStation VR that came out with the PS4, and that's the VR set I personally own. It's great. And they've announced now that they're doing a PSVR 2 for the PS5, and they've revealed their controllers. And these controllers are going to have those haptic motors and those adaptive triggers.
Ah, nice.
And I feel like that combined with, their 3D audio tech that they've spent apparently a lot of money on developing, combined obviously with just VR itself, I feel like it's going to be incredibly immersive. You'll be able to feel the thing that you're grabbing or moving or interacting with and be immersed in a space that seems cool. But VR in general, I've been, the first time I ever tried what I'd say modern day VR was one time I went to UCF for college, and I was walking through the engineering building, and there was like a Vive, HTC Vive set up. They were doing tests or something. Signed up for a slot, tried it, and I've been sold on VR ever since. And I've been fortunate enough to try the Vive, the PSVR, and the Oculus Rift S, which I think is their current like PC headset, and then the Quest 2, which is their, I think, pretty popular, no wires, super popular headset. It really is just a whole new world, like new way to play. I don't think it's the future, and it's like every game will be VR, but the technology is incredibly impressive. Just how absorbed you can get in this space and feel it. I've done like an Iron Man game, and you feel like you're flying. And at least for me, I'm not getting motion sick, which is incredibly hard to pull off and just, not make people freak out. It just, if you ever can try VR or, you want a new toy, I think the Quest 2 is a great place to start if you're cool with Facebook owning it and they now require a Facebook account to use Oculus, which is kind of a bummer. And just in general, because before you could have just had an Oculus account. But I love VR a lot. I'm a big fan of new ways to play. I even just I traded and got a 3D TV, because that technology is important.
Yeah, I really do want to try VR. I haven't had the opportunity. Several years ago now, when we were all in San Francisco for WWDC, Mike, my Analog co-host, he and CGP Grey and I think Stephen Hackett, if I'm not mistaken, all went to Facebook, and they got to try the Oculus Rift, which at the time was either brand new or fairly new. And I remember seeing them that evening, and it was as though they had flown for the first time, like without an airplane, like somehow they sprouted wings and flew away. Like the look on their faces was that this was next level and was like nothing they had ever done before. And that's how they described it. And so I do want to try it. I have no interest in owning a PC. I have no interest in like having to build a VR capable PC. So I would need to do one of the like easier and lower fidelity ones, like you had mentioned. But I do want to try it at some point. I've heard it's super cool.
Yeah, a big thumbs up for me. There's plenty of really wild and cool games. There's even some driving ones, and lightsabers, and I'm thinking of stuff. Tetris, Casey. Do you like Tetris?
I do. I'm not a super fan, but I do like it.
Okay, that's all you need to know. If you just like Tetris, there's a game called Tetris Effect, and you don't need VR to play it, but it has a VR mode. They take Tetris and make it this transformative experience. It's incredible. I actually got to write a review for that. There'll be a link to that in the show notes, but I think it's on the Quest 2, so it's accessible most places. Anyway, I digress. I really love VR, if you can't tell.
Do you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so cool. So, I want to use the Mario Kart thing as another segue. So people call me an old man on the inside because I listened to the jazz station in college instead of like what was cool on the radio, and I go to bed super early, and I keep all these old games and things around. People just call me an old man. So I think about old stuff a lot, and like I have a lot of nostalgia for a lot of things and crazy stuff. So I heard this Mario Kart home circuit thing, and I was thinking about how, in general, I mean, specifically to Declan, I suppose, but in general, like, this is someone's first Mario Kart game. And I'm assuming it's his first at 6. He may have played a different one at a younger age.
No, he had played Mario Kart 8 on the Switch. Yeah. And it's funny, actually, I'm interrupting your segue here, but he went in the span of, 6 months from he couldn't get anywhere without having auto steer on and like auto throttle and so on and so forth. In the span of, I don't know, maybe it was a month, maybe it was 6 months. I feel like it was more than a month and probably less than 6, but he eventually got to the point that he doesn't use any of those anymore. And he can play Mario Kart legitimately, and he can play battle mode legitimately. And he's not terrible. Like, he's not incredibly great because we don't let him play all that much Switch, right? But he's gotten to the point that he's workable, and there are times that like I have to actually try if I want to beat him. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating also watching that progress and that process of him going from being completely inept to being actually decent at it, all in the span of not too much time.
I can only imagine. I'm honestly excited to experience that myself someday with kids that we hopefully have. That'll be really cool. But so it's someone's first Mario Kart game, and maybe someday they'll grow up like me and they'll want to play that. They'll have like this nostalgia for it. And I feel like I don't know. I just feel like things go away and they come back, and they're hard to keep and preserve. And there are things I got rid of as a kid that I wish I could get now, and it's through the roof and it's expensive. And even I'm kind of rambling here, but even some little backstory just to how I kind of really became aware of you and your work was a Vignette. Vignette was an app that you made to import images to contacts data, which, thank you very much. All of my contacts are fully up to date and they look really good. And when someone gets added, it bugs me if they don't have an image. So thank you for that in a serious way. And you decided to sunset Vignette for various reasons. And in my head, not that necessarily people may be nostalgic for that, but I don't know, just things kind of come and go. And I feel like the App Store, a lot of things get buried.
Yep.
I don't know how you maybe feel about that. I didn't know how to really articulate this in the show notes in like a concise way, so that's why I'm a little rambly. But
yeah, I think I get what you're driving at.
How does that make you like feel? Think? I don't know.
I was born in 1982, so next year I'll be 40, and I came up and I was learning about computers at a time when a computer was a mostly understandable piece of hardware, which isn't to say that people don't understand computers now. But when I was growing up, like the first computer we had in the house didn't have a hard drive. It was one, maybe two, literally floppy disks. This is when they were literally floppy, the 3.5 inches or whatever you're thinking of as, with the plastic shell. We call that a floppy disk, but that wasn't floppy. I'm talking about the 5 1/4, like legitimately floppy disks, and that's what we were using at the time. And when I came up, things were considerably more understandable and considerably simpler. And I remember spending inordinate amounts of time as a kid trying to figure out how to write the correct config.sys and autoexec.bat for my DOS machine in order to leave enough conventional memory for some particular game I wanted to play to be able to play. Because I don't remember it well, but I believe the way DOS worked at the time was you had this stuff called conventional memory, of which you only had like 640 kilobytes of it, no matter what system you were running on. And that's where a game or an application would do most of its, not programming, but that's where most of its variables would be stored and stuff like that. And then you could use extended memory for like another 2 or 3 megabytes, or maybe 8 megabytes of RAM if you were really fancy. And again, I'm not gigabytes, megabytes. And so I would spend so much time trying to get, a mouse driver loaded at the right moment such that I still had enough conventional memory to run SimCity 2000 or something like that. And all of these things were really understandable. And if you had a diskette that had SimCity on it, you could play it. And there was nothing else really to it. And this continued with consoles. Consoles were the same way. If you had the cartridge for your NES or your Super Nintendo or even your Nintendo 64, you could play that game. And that was great. And things, especially compared to today, were much smaller. If you look at a ROM that you can pull from a Nintendo cartridge, if you look at like an original NES ROM, it's something like half a megabyte. If it's big, it's probably closer to a tenth that. It's probably like 50 kilobytes or something like that. To put things in perspective, the icons for the apps on your home screen are probably like 20 times the size of the entire original Zelda game. You know what I mean? Like it is preposterous how small they were. And because of that, they're extremely manageable. And what I can do is, and what I have done is I got myself a Raspberry Pi, which was like a $40 computer. And I acquired a bunch of ROMs. For old video games, and I put them on the Raspberry Pi, and I can play them at basically native fidelity on this Raspberry Pi. And I have done that with Declan. And I have showed him the original Mario Kart and the Super Mario Kart, I should say. Yeah. I've shown him the original Super Mario Brothers and Mario Brothers 2 and 3 and so on. And he's played some of those, and he's really enjoyed them. I haven't gone to the level of, who was it, like Andy Baio, like 5-10 years ago, that had his son start on like an Atari and wouldn't let him play things until he like went to he basically chronologically went through all these video game systems. And I'm not that bad, but nevertheless, the point I'm driving at is all of these games, the entirety of the Nintendo Entertainment System catalog is probably like 20 megs or something like that.
Probably.
It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And so it was so easy to keep it and to emulate it, because it doesn't take that much to emulate a Nintendo Entertainment System. And I feel like, the march of technology, the march of progress makes that more difficult with each passing year. But the thing that I think kind of ruined everything from a preservation point of view was the internet. It made everything better because now you can find these things if you know where to look. But it also ruined everything because now if you don't have a server to connect to, you can't play that game anymore. Imagine like if World of Warcraft, I don't know if World of Warcraft is even really a thing anymore, but if World of Warcraft servers, see, there you go. So imagine if Blizzard shuts down World of Warcraft. You can have every asset that Blizzard ever released. You can have every bit of art, every bit of music, every shader, every model, every texture. You can have all of it, but it's useless because you have no server to contact. And that's the thing that I think alarms me a little bit. I don't know if alarm is the right word, but it scares me a little bit about the internet and how it's become all consuming, because I can't, in the same way that I can put Declan in front of the games of my youth and it takes not a lot of effort, he will not be able to do that with his son or daughter when the time comes, because there will be no way to do that without contacting the internet. And all these servers are going to be long since shut down at that point. And it stinks.
Fortnite. Tremendously popular game. Biggest game in the world. You can't go back and play the first version of Fortnite that was out however many years ago when it launched, 2-3 years ago. Like, that's gone because it's continually changing into these seasons. Kids today that play Fortnite will not be able to play the version of Fortnite they're playing 10 years from now. It just won't exist. And that seems weird and almost wrong to me, especially for in that game in particular, because it's so massive and popular in this moment of time. I feel like on some level it should be accessible. You know, earlier this year, I had this feeling in my gut, in my brain, supposedly, that Sony, in my head, was like, they're going to shut down the PS3 store and like their portable system store, the Vita and the PSP. I just had this feeling like this stuff's going to go away. The PS5's out. It's all going to go. Lo and behold, a month ago, they announced they were going to close these stores. And thankfully, I had upgraded the hard drive and downloaded these games and done all of that. And I was prepared, but I mean, there are games on there that were digital only. You could only buy these games digitally. There's no physical incarnation of them. And they were going to go away. Thankfully, Sony listened to the outcry from people online, and they've reversed that decision, thankfully. But it's really just kind of a ticking time bomb. Eventually, they will shut those servers down. It just, in the end, doesn't make sense. And I feel it seems wrong on some level, because cartridges are accessible. I went through the whole process of backing up all of my cartridge games and their save datas and stuff, because that stuff runs off batteries, which is wild.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's this project kind of alongside the Raspberry Pi, and if you talk to certain people on the internet, they will be very opinionated and almost tribal or rivalistic about it. A Raspberry Pi versus something called the Mister. And the Mister is an FPGA little computer board.
Yes.
That replicates it on a hardware level. So it emulates the hardware instead of the software. That's like the bare bones understanding. So I talked to Abby and said, I would like to buy one of these now because I'm working on a book. I'm trying to work on a book about the history of a video game developer, Naughty Dog. They've made Crash Bandicoot, Uncharted, or The Last of Us. Those are kind of probably the big games most people would be familiar with. But this started out as two boys, teenagers, who made games for the Apple II.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and this Mister can emulate these old computers. And I thought, well, I can't afford an Apple II with an Amiga and an Atari ST. Like, I can't afford all of these things, let alone the games. This seems like the most economic way to accurately play them. And then I got into this. So you actually have to like set up this computer environment. Like you don't just play the game. Like you don't just click ski crazed, let's go. You like load. I guess this is how it really would have worked. You're putting the floppy disk in like to play the game, and you're loading the disk image and playing that way, or in the Atari, all this stuff. So I'm learning these computer environments by following YouTube videos for things that I've never done. I set up Windows, was it 98? I think. Could
have been 95 or 98. Mm-hmm.
I set that up, which was wild. I was like, this is where I still see that stuff in Windows 10 today on my work computer, which blows my mind that those crumbs are still in there. But it's
absolutely.
I think it's sad and important. Like, it's sad that things are going away, but I think it's important to try and save it. And I just feel, I don't know, maybe I wear permanent rose tinted glasses, and I think everything old is worth saving. But it bums me out a little bit that like stuff that people play today, they won't ever be able to play again. You know, John plays Destiny. I played my fair share of Destiny. You cannot play this Destiny that launched back in the day.
Yeah. It's just tough because especially things that are server-side, like a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, what are you supposed to do if you're Blizzard and it just doesn't make financial sense to continue to host World of Warcraft? And I don't think they're at that point now, but it'll come eventually. And what are they supposed to do? And I think, I've heard stories, and I can't remember of what games, but I've heard stories of like the remaining 100 or 200 or 1,000 or 2,000 players of such and such game banding together and basically saying to the company, look, can we buy the servers from you and we'll make it our problem? We'll deal with it. Or can we buy the server side source code and we'll maintain it and we'll deal with it? And I don't think that generally happens because intellectual property and this, that, and the other thing. But other than that, like, what are people supposed to do? What are companies supposed to do? And this is why, for me, to kind of bring this full circle, I think I grew up at the exact right time. I grew up right before the internet was a thing.
Yeah.
Like, I remember before there was the internet, and granted it existed, but nobody was using it at that point. And there's so many incredibly good things that have come from the internet. I mean, certainly I wouldn't be talking to you right now without it. Yeah. But even in the context of games, you see all these YouTube videos of people doing thorough playthroughs of these old games, oftentimes on original hardware, potentially even connected to like then current CRT TV. But you miss out on the ability to play what we consider now modern games when they're no longer modern, because they are so unbelievably reliant on the internet. And it's just, it's a bummer. And I think the internet is probably a net positive, although, I mean, depending on what your political leanings are, maybe you disagree these days, but it does have some bad, after effects. And this is one of them.
Yeah. It's a big bummer sometimes.
It really, really is.
But to end it slightly on a positive note, I do think that communities definitely do come together in incredibly powerful ways. Things like the Mister or Raspberry Pi or MAME wouldn't exist without hundreds, if not thousands, of people working together to make these things and have them last. And that's pretty cool. And, I think Apple kind of slightly did that with their Apple Arcade, and they brought some old games back with no ads and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see how that legacy will play out, because that counts too, not just games, but software and things. And I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see it as we, you even wax poetic for old phones and designs. And I mean, look, we finally got straight rail sides on the phone again. It only took.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It reminds me of, occasionally things from my youth will be open sourced. Like, I think a couple of years ago, one of the original versions of MS-DOS was open source. I think Oregon Trail got open sourced a while ago, if I'm not mistaken. I might be making this up, but things along those lines. And whenever that happens, like when Doom finally got open sourced, I always go and just, even though I don't spend a lot of time on it, I always go and just take a look and see what it looked like to be in the code of Doom. It's like when you go to a foreign country and you eat a local bit of food, like a locally beloved dish. Even if you're doing it in a tourist trap, it's still giving you like a different perspective on life and on that locale. And, going through John Carmack's Doom code is just so fascinating, because in so many ways he's obviously so much brighter than I am, but it's also just cool seeing what it looked like to work on that kind of code, even though that was 30 years ago or whatever it may be.
Especially when it's something that fundamentally changed just entertainment in general, not just in games, but for everyone. I mean, heck, the Mortal Kombat movie just came out. We just watched that. It was pretty it's pretty fun.
Oh man!
I suppose this counts as real-time follow-up. I've never said that or done it before, but it counts. Super Mario Brothers for the NES, 41 kilobytes, and
oh wow!
The Legend of Zelda North American version, 131 kilobytes.
Oh, that's actually quite a bit bigger than I thought, to be honest with you. It's still tiny in the grand scheme of things, but quite a bit larger than I thought it might be.
Yeah, and the Japanese version is the same. The Japanese version actually ran on floppy disk, because they had a disk system over there. Anyway.
Oh, that's wild.
Fun stuff. They had more music. They had better music. It's great. Anyway, save old stuff. That's why I still have a tube TV, because I won't let it die. And my wife, my wife graciously lets me keep it in the house.
And it must weigh like 3,000 pounds too.
Well, it's pretty heavy. I've carried it up 3 flights of stairs before. That was a bit intense. Thankfully it's only a 27-inch, I think. So
it's only 2,000 pounds then.
Yeah. But everything looks better on it, I swear.
Yeah.
Now to just hard transition, because I don't have a segue for this one. I don't have the smooth magic for this. Another thing that I noticed, or I looked up and noticed, is you left what I'm going to say affectionately call jobby job. You left your real job to do, your own thing, to be solo, to work for yourself and with other people, but, you're your own boss. And that's coming up on almost 3 years, I think, here in the beginning of June, right?
Yeah, I think my last day at my joby job was the end of May.
Okay.
I think. Oh, no. Was it the end of June? It was either end of May or end of June. I forget.
We're really close to 3 years. And I guess off the bat, like, how's that been going for you? Like, how do you feel 3 years later? You've left that and you've been doing your own thing.
Yeah, it's been going really well. When I went independent, Declan was, what was he? Almost 4, and he was in preschool at the time, and a couple of years away was when he was going to start kindergarten. And I told myself, if I can make this work, even just for a couple of years, so I can be around while Declan's still here, then I will consider that a success. And he started kindergarten this past fall, and as it turns out, he's still here because of COVID, and he's been doing it all virtually. But nevertheless, I consider that a success in terms of being independent. And now I'm trying to reach my stretch goal of until Michaela, my daughter, who is currently a little bit over 3, until she goes to kindergarten. Right. And so that'll be, another couple of years from now. And if I can survive until she's in kindergarten, at that point, not that I don't want to spend time with Erin, my wife, but at that point, the real pressing, I don't know, if need or urgency or impetus for being independent kind of goes away, because the real idea was trying to be home with the kids. Mm-hmm. And in a perfect world, I'll be able to be independent until I retire, but I'm trying to keep in the back of my mind that may not end up happening, that I might have to get a traditional job again. And I'm trying to keep myself somewhat employable. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today, and he's been independent for like 6 years now, and he was joking to me that he is just completely and utterly unemployable at this point. And I like to think and hope that that's not the case for me. But I don't know. You get very used to very quickly not having to deal with all the BS that comes with having a traditional job. Now, there's plenty of different BS that I have to deal with,
I'm
but
sure
it's a lot more palatable and a lot easier to deal with when it's self-created, rather than having to deal with some moronic coworker that the company just won't fire because they've been there 300 years,
I wonder, hearing you say that, you wanting to be there for your kids while they're at home, they're kids. Mm-hmm. My dad, he had his own company when we were younger, my brother and I. He built houses, essentially he was trying to be the Chip and Joanna Gaines before, they were a huge...
Before it was cool.
Yeah, before it was cool. He was a trailblazer in that space.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, with hindsight 2020, that ended pretty roughly, which was what led to us having to move from Indiana, because he got a job at a construction company based here in Florida. But we didn't move to Florida. We moved to St. John of the U.S. Virgin Islands while he built timeshares there for a resort. So we got to live.
Oh, wow. That's wild.
It is wild. We got to live there for 14 months in one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Oh, you poor baby.
I know. And honestly, as a 12, 13-year-old, didn't entirely appreciate it.
Of course.
Surprisingly. And I definitely look back and wish I had kind of soak that up more, unfortunately. Anyway, to my kind of point though is, he did that, and I part of it was I think, knowing my dad, he wanted to do something for himself. He wanted to, build something, not just houses, but build his own business and be successful on his own. And actually now he's back he's doing his own thing, and he's very good at what he does. I work with him on some projects on a smaller scale. It's great. And I'm not a parent, and so I just try to wrap my head around that I'm home all the time because of current circumstances, and my job fortunately allows me to work from home, and I enjoy that. But I remember my dad being home, and that made an impact. That's definitely made an impact on me. And I think doing that for your kids sounds like pretty good. As a person who was a kid whose dad stayed home and was around, we were also homeschooled from second grade up through 7th. We were homeschooled, so my mom taught us, and my dad was home, and that really did have, I think, an overall positive impact on me. So I guess a big thumbs up to you for staying up with your kids. I think in the end that'll be good for them.
I hope so, and I appreciate the kind words, and thank you. I love my dad to death. My parents are still together. I spoke to my dad a couple of times today, which is a little bit unusual to talk to him more than once in a day. And even actually talking to him once in a day is slightly unusual, but I still love my dad very much. And my dad is a really, really great guy. But he was not around a whole ton when we were kids. He was very, very focused on work, and he provided financially, if not in other ways, he provided a pretty nice life for my two younger brothers and I, and my mom and I. But he certainly wasn't the hands-on dad that, he wasn't the stereotypical, like, hey, son, let's go out and throw the ball around kind of dad. And that's fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But as you are wont to do when you become a parent, you want to emulate the things that you enjoyed of your childhood, and then you want to fix the errors that your parents made during your childhood.
Of course.
And so I certainly have a long way to go. I am not a perfect dad by any stretch of the imagination, but and I'm not as present a dad as I should be in many, many ways. However, I'm considerably more present than I think my dad was, and I think it's in most ways that's good. In some ways that's bad. But for the most part, I think it's a good thing. And I hope that the kids will remember this and reflect upon it in a good way. It's tough though, because think about, Max, what you remember from being in kindergarten. I would argue it's not a lot.
It isn't.
And that's what my eldest child is at right now, is kindergarten. So I fear a little bit that I will be compelled, or perhaps choose, but likely be compelled to get a jobby job again. And I'll remember this time, which is excellent.
Yes.
And Aaron will remember this time, which is excellent. But the two people that I want more than anyone else in the world to remember this time may not. And that's a bit of a bummer. However, to turn that frown upside down, so much of a person's life is formed in their childhood, and particularly early childhood, in my personal opinion. And it's not to say that people don't change. It's not to say that you're stuck forever in your ways once you hit kindergarten or something like that. But both of my kids are honest to goodness people now, especially Michaela in the last year has gone from a 2-year-old that barely talks to a honest to goodness person. And to be here to help shape that and help push them in the right direction as much as possible is really rewarding. And I'm incredibly, incredibly lucky to be able to do that and be here with them. And it's because of the people that listen to this podcast that maybe have come because of, maybe some of them have come because I'm here. But even if you just listen to the podcast anyway, and now you're aware of who I am, and maybe you'll check out ATP or Analog or check out my apps, it's because of all of the people that I'm lucky enough to speak to that I can do this in the first place. And so, even though it's not 100%, ice cream and lollipops, I try very hard not to lose sight of the fact that I'm intensely, incredibly lucky. And I just hope that I can ride this wave as long as I possibly can. And at this point, it's been almost 3 years, and that's pretty darn great. And so here's hoping I can stick with it.
Sounds like a pretty big wave when you put it in.
I'm hoping. The unfortunate thing is, even though I'm surfing on the top of it, I can't really see how far down it goes. And in some ways that's great, and in some ways it's not. But I'm certainly hoping so.
This was in the notes on my phone, I forgot to put this in the Google Doc. But you've been doing ATP for 8 years now. And
yes. Yep.
So I think it was last year, you guys launched a membership. I'll do your job right now. Was it atp.fm/membership, right?
/join.
I'm sorry. So atp.fm/join. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it's safe to say that the pandemic last year maybe, I don't think kickstart is right, because I would assume you guys were thinking about it beforehand and planning on it, but maybe kind of jump-started it, got the ball rolling a little bit faster. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. We had been kicking around the idea of doing membership for probably 2 to 4 years.
Yeah.
But we really wanted to be aware and cognizant of how it would come across, because we wanted to give superfans a way to support us, which obviously is completely self-serving, but also as a person who is a super fan of other people, it feels good to be able to support the people that you really, really enjoy and whose work you really, really cherish. And we wanted to give that option, but we didn't want to feel like we were taking away in order to do it. So, for example, one of my favorite podcasts is a podcast called Do by Friday, and they have a Patreon, and the way their Patreon works is you get basically a second episode each week, a bonus episode, an after show, as they call it, if you give them, at least $5 a month. And ATP, in the format that we've had for years now, well, basically 8 years now, we have our own after show. And that's been part of the show for almost the entire run of the show. Mm-hmm. And the obvious way to make a membership program is to say, all right, free people can get the show. And if you want the after show, then you have to pay. But then you're taking all of the people who had been getting that for free and you're saying, oh, no, we'd like your money now, please. And that just feels gross. It feels gross to say it, and it feels extremely gross to be on the receiving end of it.
Oh, yeah.
And so, what do you do in that situation? And how do you handle that? And it wasn't until the pandemic when we saw ad sales really just absolutely tank that we realized, okay, even though ad sales for the most part are good and certainly considerably more lucrative than membership, we should diversify to some degree and try to make sure that we're keeping ourselves covered such that if a pandemic happens suddenly that we can still doing the thing that we do love doing, but we can still do it from a financial perspective. And so, that was when Marco and John and I really thought, okay, let's make this work. What can we do to encourage people to sign up? And we went through a couple of phases with this. And the beginning was basically, well, you can support us and we appreciate it. That's all you get. And that wasn't a very good sell, but it was an honest sell because we didn't want to take away what was already there. And we wanted to give the superfans a chance to support us if they felt like we were worth it. And many more people than I expected did. And we're extremely lucky for that. Around the time that we were launching the membership program, I think it was John and I in particular were saying to Marco, we should really do a bootleg because we know that a lot of people enjoy listening to ATP Live and some of them can't really do that because perhaps they're in Europe where it's like in the middle of the night or perhaps, 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening Eastern time. It's just not convenient for them. And really big super fans would set up like Audio Hijack or something like that in order to record the live stream, and then they would listen to it time shifted later. But most people don't want to bother with that. And eventually we were able to convince Marco to release what we call the bootleg. And what Marco does is one of the files that he's recording as we speak to each other is a deliberately crummier version in terms of audio fidelity, a crummier version of what's being broadcast live. And literally within a couple of minutes of us hanging up with each other, or really of us ending the show because we hang on for a little bit and shoot the stuff afterwards. Within a couple of minutes of us finishing the show, that bootleg is up and available for listeners to listen to. And not everyone does because, again, the audio fidelity is not great. There's no editing. We have moments where we're stumbling over each other. We have moments where we're yelling at each other and, trying to figure out what the next thing is we should talk about. But a lot of people really value that. And it does. One of the good things about it is it lets some topics breathe that wouldn't have made the show otherwise. So a great example of this is a lot of times we'll get talking about cars as we're off to do. And we'll talk about it, maybe we'll talk about some cars or argue about Tesla for 20 minutes and only 2 minutes of that makes the edited show. Now, on the one side, that's the only 2 minutes that were really good and easy to listen to. But The other side of that is maybe you're a super Tesla fan, or maybe you're a super car fan and you really just want to hear all 20 minutes of that. And so that's one of the benefits that membership to ATP affords. And then additionally, we're actually selling merchandise right now. So atp.fm/store.
There you go.
And if you're a member, you get 15% off merchandise. And that's a really nice thing too. So we're trying to do what we can to do something that's good for us and for the listeners while not making those who don't want to or are unwilling or unable to pay, while not making them feel like they're getting cheated.
As someone who listens, I appreciate that 100%. So I think I shared this story with you when I pitched you to come on the show. And I think I even said at the beginning, I was like, here's a lot of backstory that you can skip if you want. And now I'm going to share it with everybody. But for a few years, I did a weekly game show with my best friend Logan, and we were doing that. And then we started our own little podcast network. We kind of tried that out for a little bit with a couple of other really good friends, Mike and Mario. And that was up to and while I was in college. And you don't know what you have until it's gone, but definitely had way fewer responsibilities in college than I do now as an adult. But around the time that I got engaged, which was the January, kind of the beginning of my final semester of college, we got engaged in January. We got married in October, and we graduated in the summer there, June or whenever. And I just felt burnt out. I had reached my podcasting and writing for news outlets to like reach certain quotas. I just met my wit's end. I was like, I need to stop. And me stopping, unfortunately for them, I mean, they were also burnt out. It was a group decision, but I definitely was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and kind of all of it just kind of fell apart. And I still feel bad about that a lot, probably more than they actually realize. That's why in my Twitter bio, they call me a podcast killer. That's why podcast killer's there. And I took a good, honest 2.5 year break. And I kind of just was like, I need to step back and soak up. But I love doing this. I love podcasts. I love writing. And I wanted to figure out how to do this, not necessarily as my job, because that was always the goal in college and stuff. Was like, I'm going to go to California and be a video game writer. And then I met my wife, and my whole life changed for the better. She is incredible. I am eternally thankful that she said yes. I love her so much. And so in that time, I stopped listening to like a lot of game podcasts. I really stepped away from a lot of it. I still played games and was on Twitter. And I started listening to other shows. And that's when I was aware of like Relay in the periphery. I was aware of kind of this whole Apple tech circle. I even remember one time, when the Mac Pro roundtable happened, and Quinn Nelson of Snazzy Labs tweeted out a Daring Fireball article. And I was like, this guy seems kind of cool. How does he know all this Mac stuff? Which turns out to be John Gruber. And I remember later I was like, what was that Apple site? It had like fire in the name. What is this? Well, lo and behold, I kind of took those breaks to sink my teeth into this Apple scene, which is another side of my life that I love quite a bit. And I really noticed a lot of the stuff that Relay and ATP and Daring Fireball and, you know, Stratechery. Now we've got Dithering. You know, all these shows do certain things that I noticed weren't in the gaming space. Gruber writes a blog. I mean, that's his bread and butter. That's what he's been doing for, I don't know how many years, a very long time. That's just what he does. And, you know, Relay, they have really tight shows that are edited, but they do quality of life things, you know, chapters, chapter art. One thing I personally love is ads are marked as chapters. And if I wanted to skip them, I would. But kind of what you were saying about an honest sale, I listen to them. And I've used codes from ATP and Relay and stuff. I like knowing that they're aware, like, hey, this is the part of the ad. And if I did skip it, I do know that it, you know, it goes into the like last 15 seconds of the ad where you hear the important stuff, the code and where to go. Like, and that as a business practice makes sense. Absolutely 100%. But I respect it. And because I respect it, I actually listen to the ads. I know way more about Hover and Yes Please and all the, my desk. I have a fully desk.
Well done.
See, and that's been repaid in kind. And I subscribe to Dithering, which is great, great show, and I respect that. And so I wanted to bring that in some way to video games, and that's why I started Max Frequency, just a place for me to dump my long form thoughts, because Twitter's not really good at long form things and having engaging discussions with people on most topics. I just saw that and wanted to bring it to the gaming space. And I obviously have a note full of podcast ideas. And I finally got to the point of, I just need to do a show. And I actually have another project that's actually coming out very soon. That's a different type of podcast that's even more structured. Anyway, all this to say is, I wanted to bring that to the space, and I've been thinking a lot about being upfront with that and not taking away from people, because then it makes me respect whoever's making the thing more. And if you offer something, Craig Mod, he offers these newsletters all the time, and I just signed up for a new one today where he's going to go on this crazy long walk through Japan. It's going to sound really cool. And then he's going to delete my email later, which honestly, I don't mind if he kept my email because I like what he does. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, first of all, thank you for being honest, not taking away, and trying to just enhance the experience. And then also thank you for being one of the inspirations for just getting me back into this, and I think a healthy way for me, where it's fun and I'm not feeling the pressure of doing stuff every week and meeting certain structures and deadlines. And so thank you, Casey. That's a very long-winded way to say thank you.
Well, I'm very, very red right now, and that's extremely kind of you. You know, we're all treading in the footsteps of those who came before. I mean, if you look at, you know, I used to talk about this a lot more when it was all newer, but if you look at even my experience in podcasting, you know, I just so happened to be lucky enough to be friends with John and Marco, and when they were ending their shows on 5x5, you know, I had convinced them that hey, we should do a car show together. Well, I had convinced Marco, and I believe it was Marco's idea to get John involved. And, you know, I was able to ride on their coattails. And then I like to think that, you know, maybe that was my way of getting in the door, but I like to think I've made some pretty decent contributions to the space since then. And you know, everything is a remix, right?
Yeah.
and it's interesting trying to balance, for anyone, I think it's interesting trying to balance things that you're passionate about and how I think so many of us, myself included, are interested in monetizing the things that we love. Because if you can do that, if you can monetize the thing that you love, then you're not really working anymore, are you? You're just playing for money. And that's a pretty great place to be at. And it's a tough thing. It's a very tough thing. And, you know, I didn't go independent until 2018, and ATP had been running for a full 5 years at that point. So, you know, it's not the sort of thing that most people can just, you know, flip a switch and there you are. But for those that are lucky enough to have even any sort of side hustle that's adding rather than subtracting, I mean, that's an incredibly powerful place to be. I mean, even, you know, if you look at when I first went independent, I dabbled with, you know, doing YouTube car reviews, and I am slightly embarrassed by that, but also very proud of it at the same time. And I spent not an extreme amount of money, but not a little bit of money on, you know, cameras and microphones and things of that nature and software in order to make that kind of dream happen. And even though on paper all of that was both a waste of time and money, I value very much that experience, and it was a lot of fun. And that's the normal kind of side hustle experience, right? You pour some money into it, you stick it out for like a month or two, and then you realize this is not working. And if you, the listener, have any sort of side hustle wherein you're not just pouring money into it, but it's actually giving money back, that in and of itself is an incredibly powerful place to be. And I cannot encourage you enough to try to ride that wave, to build, you know, just to absolutely murder this metaphor that we've been using on and off all night, to ride that wave and see if you can make something out of it. Because certainly when I first started recording Neutral, which was the predecessor to ATP, I didn't think that it was effectively going to be my full-time job in 5 years. I remember vividly, and I've mentioned this offhandedly a couple times, but I remember vividly when I told Aaron that I wanted to get a Rode Podcaster, you know, a microphone and boom arm and so on. And I don't remember how much it was, but I want to say it was like $200. And I remember telling her, hey, I want to get this, you know, $200 microphone and whatnot in order to try to do a podcast with Marco and John. And I remember her being like, that's fine, but really? Like, you really need this, all $200 of it? I was like, yeah, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. And it turns out it was all right. But at the time, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know. She didn't know. I didn't know. You know, so it was a risk. Yeah.
I've had my fair share of, hey, I would like to get this for this purpose. Yep. Are you sure you need that one?
Exactly.
I remember, this is not for a side hustle, but I remember when our TV broke last year. It was right before the Super Bowl, which meant there were a lot of Super Bowl ads on TV. Or not ads, deals, like to buy new TVs.
Oh, that is true.
It was not
That's
a bummer.
point.
It was actually a really good thing. And I, like John, I'm kind of always on top of the TVs and stuff. And this was also right before the new video game consoles came out. So I knew what like specs they needed to do everything. And when we went through the options, she was like, do we really need this? Because she swears she can't tell the difference between a VHS tape and a 4K Blu-ray. Blows my mind, but...
Oh, my word.
She's like, it's all a movie to me. And I'm like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
But she graciously let me get the TV that I wanted to get, frankly. And, you know, I really love it. She still watches stuff on her phone more than the actual TV. But anyway, it's...
Whatever works.
Yes, I've learned to... I've been learning a lot lately that my way isn't always the right way. And, like, just... maybe to tie it back to that, the Mister versus Raspberry Pi thing. So I personally really think the hardware emulation is quote unquote better. And like, that's what I pursue. Highest fidelity of video output, all this stuff. But really in the end, it's about playing the game, right? Or watching the movie or doing the thing. And that's what's important. And I've been learning personally lately that I need to let those things go. And just if someone's enjoying it, that's the win.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And something that I think I've been very bad about, and I'm trying very hard to get better about, is I can be very tribalistic, and I can be very, you know, my team rules, your team stinks about any number of things. And, you know, and I think this might be a Merlinism, or at least that's where I heard it, but I'm trying very hard not to yuck other people's yum. And I think I've been very guilty of that for a long, long time. And I still do it from time to time, but I'm trying very hard to be better about that. And, you know, if you want to do something that is not the way I think you should do it, as long as you're not hurting anyone, you're not hurting me, not hurting you, then, you know, whatever. Do you and do it the way you want to do it.
I've been trying that a lot. The hardest space for me to do that right now is particularly the kitchen. If Abby is cooking or helping me, I have a very hard time of not stepping in and doing it how I think it should be done. That is definitely the hardest space for me. I'm definitely a rule follower. This is how it's done, and we need to do it this way and in this order. And I'm trying to let it go, but it's very hard, you know, to take. How old am I now? I'll be 27, so 26 years of holding on with, like, you know, an iron grip and trying to let that go. Hopefully, I get better at it. The other, I guess, side of your, you know, being independent is your apps and stuff. And I know you're working on a new one. The journalist in me is not trying to get like the scoop on your new app. But just how has that been? I know a Vignette, and I know I'm going to mess up the name because I don't remember. It's Pika View?
Yep, Pika View.
Pika View. Right. Were there other apps before Vignette, before I was aware? Like, how has that side of it been for you? You know, well, you know, how's the app development side been for you?
It's been all right. There was an app that I had written mostly for myself early on. It was like iOS 2 or 4. I want to know. It must have been iOS 4. This was when I was very much employed with a jobby job. And I wrote an app called Fast Text. And the idea was you could set up, much like you can now with shortcuts, but it was much more rudimentary. You could set up like a series of contacts and a series of messages. And so the way I had used it was if I was going to come home from maybe not work, because, you know, that's every day, but if I'm coming home from like a night out with my friends or something like that, I could open Fast Text, and with just a couple of taps, I could say, on my way home, send it to Aaron, go. And that's all it did. And it was very simple, and it had a hilariously bad icon, which Marco and John made immense amounts of fun of me for. But nevertheless, that's what that was. And that made very little money. And it was more than anything me proving to myself that I could get an app in the App Store. And I did. That got pulled after like 4 years because it was kind of embarrassing at that point, because at that point I knew how to write a decent app, and that app was not decent. And so it was kind of a testament to my ineptitude, or a monument to my ineptitude. And so I eventually took it down. Then after that, once I went solo, I did Vignette, which you had described earlier. That actually made decent money. As with all apps, it made it all in one lump at the beginning, and then it basically petered off after that. I had planned to keep that going for a while, but within a year of it having been released, you know, the way the app worked was it would go to like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and stuff in order to pull these profile pictures. And over the span of the first year of its existence, basically all of the services it used ended up doing things that prevented it from working. And I don't think they were targeting Vignette specifically, but presumably other services or other apps or something were using similar techniques to get at this data. And eventually they started saying, no, and if you want to get at somebody else's profile picture, you need to be logged in, which is something I could have done, but it would have dramatically changed the app. It would have been a tremendous amount of work. I don't think it would have been financially prudent for me to do it. And so I eventually, to use a Silicon Valley term, I sunset it. And then, for Declan's 5th birthday, which was in the tail end of 2019, that's when Michaela was less than 2 years old, and we spent a week in Disney World, which is one of my favorite places on earth, and a place that my understanding is you have some amount of familiarity with. And we were there, and at that point, Michaela really was too young for Disney, but we really weren't going to leave her home or anything, and so we took her, and in order to keep her kind of satisfied and from being bored and cranky, what we realized was she loved looking at pictures on our phones. And what I would do is I would just hand her the app, hand her the phone with the Photos app running, and she would flip through pictures. But that was utterly terrifying to me because I'm looking at her and I'm waiting for her finger to mash on the trash can icon and start deleting things.
Yeah.
And so Peekaview was born in Disney World. I mean, I didn't work on it there, but it was
the idea.
The thought happened there. The idea happened there. And I came home and, I think I was doing a little bit of work on Vignette. And then after that was able to wrap up. I spent some time on Peekaview and ended up writing that and releasing it. And it's still out. I need to make some bug fix changes and whatnot, but I've been so tunnel visioned on this new thing that I haven't had time for it. But it's not a terribly complex app. It's not necessarily as universally applicable as Vignette was, but it's an app that I still use every day, and she still loves looking at pictures, and I still use Peekaview to get her. And I don't think I very explicitly described what it does, but it's a read-only photo gallery. So there is no way to edit a picture. There's no way to delete a picture. The only thing you can do is look at them. And so that, especially when paired with the iOS feature called Guided Access, which will lock you into an app, that means it's safe to hand a toddler or a client your phone and know that they can't go, spelunking into your personal and private information, and they also can't delete or edit anything. So I still use it, and I'm hopeful that I'm going to get this new app out sooner rather than later. Realistically, it's probably not the case. As with everyone else, I've had a bear of a time getting anything done over the last 12 to 14 months as the world has ended. But it's getting there, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, no, I'm always curious when I think that side of any business is interesting because the only code I know is like very rudimentary HTML that I had to learn in college. I find that stuff interesting and just people, how it works and things like that. And like I said earlier in the show, I personally loved a Vignette. It actually, besides just getting pictures, and it actually motivated me to really fully detail and update my contacts. Now I'm all in. People are linked together, spouses, brothers, sisters, the whole thing, addresses. The other day, my cousin sent a message in the group chat. She's pregnant, and she was looking, she needed everyone's address to send them what turned out to be an invitation to like the shower stuff. Here's where we're registered, that stuff. And at that moment when the text came through, I almost said, hold up, I got everyone's address, and was about to send them all. And that makes me feel good. I know when people's birthdays are now without relying on Facebook to tell me. I know ahead of time. So thank you for helping me get a hold on my contacts list.
I'm very particular about keeping everything up to date. And I think that it is in part born from me having the world's worst memory. And so I know if I don't write something down or have a designated place for it, I'll never remember it. Yep. And so because of that, my contacts list, I occasionally get made fun of for how robust and how wide spanning my contact information goes. But I don't want to ever have to go to a friend that I've known for a long time and be like, hey, what's your address again?
Yep. I don't like that feeling either.
Times. Yep. So, yeah, I completely understand it. And I'm glad that I can inspire at least one person to clean that up a little bit.
Yeah. It also made me aware of when Clubhouse launched and they wanted all your contact information. I went, no, I don't feel comfortable sharing this. Not because, because it's, I guess, everyone's phone number, which we hand out like candy, and I'm very aware of that since Oh, what was that podcast? I'm going to find it for the show notes. But it was it was like the Snapchat thief or something was the episode. And it was terrifying. These people that like go in and steal usernames, it was a whole rabbit hole. Made me really scared of like phone numbers and two-factor. Anyway.
Oh, yep.
Creepy stuff. But when Clubhouse, I was like, this has my friends' addresses in it and their birthdays. And I was like, even if Clubhouse says they're not taking it, I don't feel comfortable just blindly giving it to them, whoever they are. So I never shared that. And Clubhouse is like, but you have so many invites you can use. I'm like, I don't really want to use them. Sorry. And now Twitter does what Clubhouse does, so it's all fine in the end.
It all comes full circle.
It does.
Now, if you'll permit me, I'd like to turn the tables a little bit, though, because I became aware of you, Max, because you reached out and said, hey, I don't remember exactly how it went, but in so many words, you basically said, hey, I have some really sweet pictures of Disney World. Do you want me to share them? To which I believe I said, yeah. And so I guess we probably can't dig in but so much, and I know we've been running a little long, but I can't help but ask, you seem to have, and I'm winking a little bit here, you seem to have a little bit of experience with Disney World. Do you want to, or can you share any of your history with Disney World, or any reason why you may have a little bit of experience with it?
Yeah, I mean, so for those of you that don't know, I work for Disney World down here in Florida, so Walt Disney World, Parks and Resorts, Technical Publications. That's my department. I write the ride manuals, so I help when an attraction goes down. Our manuals help the maintenance people fix the attractions. So that's part of what I do. I go around, I document these attractions and how they work, their AV systems, projection, all the things that make the ride go and give guests that magical experience at the most magical place on earth. It is. It truly, truly is.
So, and how long have you been doing this?
I have been with Disney now 2 years. So I started as a contractor in April. It was right after Endgame came out. And then
nice.
Yeah, I actually I told them my start date, like I was available to start after Endgame, because I was like, I want to get this out of the way first. It was a little selfish of me, but I was like, I need to do this before I come to work. And then I became a full-time cast member in July. So 2 years, actually, and I guess 2 years in the eyes of the company here in July. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing that. I mean, I've been going to Disney my whole life. We made a road trip as a kid down here. So maybe to tie back to your road trip story, I remember one morning, our parents woke us up, me and my brother, loaded us in the car ungodly early. I honestly couldn't tell you what time it was. And they said, hey, come on, we're going to look at houses, which at that time made sense because we were trying to move, I think, or I don't know. That wasn't an out of the question type thing to do. What we didn't realize in our sleepy stupor was that the car was fully loaded. And we kept driving. We went to Cracker Barrel, the typical road trip American place to stop. Mom bought a map, and we just kept driving south, and eventually we didn't figure it out until we got to Georgia, and we're like, well, if we keep going in this direction, the only place to go is Florida. And we have family here. My mom's side of the family lives here. So we were going to visit them and go to Disney World. Yay! And so we went to Disney. So awesome. It's great. And the other classic that still gets brought up to this day is we walk in Disney World, Magic Kingdom, Main Street, not really just past the kind of that front circle area where you can meet different characters. And my parents can't find me. I mean, we're not even 5 minutes in the park. I'm gone.
Oh, no.
They look around, and I'm sitting on the curb, head in my hands. And they look at me and they go, what's wrong? Come on, what's going on? And I go, I can't take another step. And that's when my parents looked at each other and went, this is going to be a long day.
Oh, no. Oh, my word.
Yeah, so that gets brought up a lot. And then when I met my wife, at the time, girlfriend, Abby, we maybe had been dating a few months, and we kind of both said, want to get annual passes? And we did. We dropped. At the time, they cost $500. She made me. This was for Florida residents. 1 year pass, all 4 parks, no blackout dates. So it was kind of not the top one, but the one below it. And she made me buy mine first. Probably very smart of her. But when she saw I made the financial investment, she made it too. And for that first real year of dating, we went to Disney a lot, all the time.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
We had a great time, and we love Disney. And then now I work there.
That is super incredible. All right. So of the parks, which is your favorite?
Hollywood Studios. And that was before they brought Star Wars and Toy Story.
That's a very bold choice. I actually have always I am old enough that I still call it MGM, but I've always loved Hollywood Studios, but I feel like that is the least beloved of the 4 parks that are at Disney World. So tell me, why do you love it?
Well, it has show. So I loved the hat. They don't have the hat anymore, but there was a big hat.
Yeah, I remember
big
that.
Magic hat.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana Jones. They have the Little Mermaid attraction. Now they have Rock and Roller Coaster, which I still think is the best roller coaster in all of the Disney parks.
I love Rock and Roller Coaster so darn much.
Tower of Terror, I love. Abby hates it. We rode it one time, and I thought she was going to break my fingers. Seriously, between me and the metal bar, it was pretty bad. She will not ride that anymore, and that's perfectly okay. But then now they have, Toy Story Land. I'm a huge, I came out at the age for Toy Story 1, and I've been watching not just Toy Story, but all Pixar movies since, their very beginning. I'm very attached to all of it. I love all of it. Toy Story Mania, which is you put the 3D glasses on and you sit in the vehicle and turn around and kind of shoot different objects at things, kind of like Buzz Lightyear.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to jump in right here. So Declan, when we went, we basically just did whatever it was that he wanted to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we told him what parks we were going to, but once we got there, it was mostly up to him what we did. And when we got to Magic Kingdom, which was where we knew we would be spending most of our time, he immediately just connected with Space Ranger Spin, and that was basically all we did the entire time we were there. And he loved it. And so here it was, I'd never done Toy Story Mania, and I had assumed that it was just going to be Space Ranger Spin and basically the exact same thing. And it is not. Like, it on paper, it's vaguely similar, but to my eyes, I actually thought Toy Story Mania was way cooler.
It is.
And I loved Toy Story Mania. I thought it was super neat.
It still is my favorite ride, like pound for pound. Toy Story Mania is just great. And so that whole section of the park is awesome. And now there's Galaxy's Edge, which is the Star Wars land. And I've been 3 times now. I got to do an early cast preview. And I got to take my he was the best man at my wedding, Josh. He's a huge Star Wars fan. Abby said she was fine not going to the preview, so we got to do that and ride Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, which you get to pilot the Millennium Falcon, which is just, as someone who grew up on Star Wars, that type of thing, that's like dream come true type material. It's crazy.
Yep, absolutely.
She also, again, my wife is the best. She let me build the lightsaber experience. This is the metal, nice. The real lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
It's a show production. Like, the cast members are walking you through this whole how to build it. You choose it's a whole experience, and it's more than just put the pieces together. Here you go. It really is kind of this emotional experience that I think it sounds cliche to say, but only Disney can really pull it off like that. And it was just extremely powerful. And I think about that when I see kids walking around the park with the bag that you put that lightsaber in, and I know what they went through, and just how cool that must feel if it felt that cool to me as a 20-something-year-old adult, I can only imagine for a little kid how cool that would be. And so they also have Rise of the Resistance as the other attraction there, and that is next level of immersion.
And no spoilers. I haven't ridden it yet.
Casey, I work for the company, and I tried to avoid. I thankfully was not assigned those manuals. I didn't work on that. I stayed away from it as much as possible. I would never want to spoil any of again, cliche, but the magic that happens in any of this stuff. So no worries for me. It's truly wonderful, though. And Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, which is inside the Chinese theater and takes the place of I think it was the Great Movie Ride.
Great Movie Ride, yeah.
Which, bummer, because they had Alien in there, which I love Alien. But Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway truly is an immersive experience. Like we were talking with VR, not that you're putting goggles or anything on it, none of that is involved, but just the immersion that the Imagineers put in and everything in to make this attraction come to life is astounding. And so whenever you do come back to Disney World and Hollywood Studios, I highly encourage you to check all of that out. It's truly wonderful. And that's not as someone who works for the company trying to like sell it. That is me as a fan and just a person who loves this place. That's what's coming through.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. I was lucky enough to go to Disney World a handful of times as a kid, maybe 3 or 4 times. And then when I met Erin, she was a huge Disney fan, but had never been to Disney World. And I had, even prior to meeting Erin, I had always thought, it would be kind of neat to honeymoon in Disney. And that's what we ended up doing, is we honeymooned in Disney World. And it was an amazing, magical honeymoon. In some ways, I'm not sure it was the right choice insofar as basically all we did was run around Disney World all day, which was amazing, but maybe not the best choice for a honeymoon.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it was incredible fun. And then for Erin's 30th birthday, I had printed out 2 different weather reports, and I had said to her, all right, I want you to pack 1 suitcase for this, which was Orlando, and although it didn't say it on the sheet, right. And I said, here, I want you to pack a suitcase for this, which was London, and I'm going to grab the appropriate suitcase, then we're going to go. And that's what we did. And when we got to the airport, this was before you would print your own boarding passes, and we got to the airport, and I went to the check-in counter, and I said, okay, Casey Liss, and I'm heading out today. And the person asked, where are you going? And I said Orlando, and she just looked at me like, what? And so we did a week at Disney for her 30th, which is extremely cool.
That's awesome.
And then for Declan's 5th, and hopefully, if the world is back to normal enough, we'll be doing it for Michaela's 5th in a couple of years as well. But I love MGM or Hollywood Studios. I agree. I could ride a rock and roller coaster all day, every day. Mm-hmm. I could just do it nonstop. It is such a fun ride. But I love it so much. For me, my favorite attraction in all of Disney World, which is something I've discovered is actually not as unique as I had originally thought. But my favorite attraction, hands down by a mile, is the People Mover in Magic Kingdom. I love the People Mover so much.
People Mover, extremely popular. Good ride.
Yeah, I never thought so, but it seems to be. It seems to be a lot more people's favorite than I ever would have expected.
I think there is just something about moving around above everyone and looking down and seeing stuff, and it goes through Space Mountain, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep, that's right.
Come on, going through the attraction while other people are on it, it's so cool.
It's super fun. It's a lazy river in the air on land. How can you go wrong?
You can't.
It's awesome.
And it's also a great way to cool down, too.
Exactly right. Exactly.
You got to be thinking about that stuff at the park.
And that's a perfect segue. You set me up perfectly. Where are some of your favorite places to chill out? And you can define chill out however you want. Maybe that's cool down. Maybe it's somewhere that's not terribly popular, so you can actually have a moment to yourself. Are there any hidden gems that you're willing to share on the podcast?
Well, not too far from the People Mover, the Carousel of Progress. Not only does that song get stuck in your head all day, and I actually
it is a great big beautiful tomorrow.
It is. It's a great big. I think it's way catchier than It's a Small World.
Oh gosh, yes.
But that is just a loop, and it's an air conditioning in the dark choice. I would not recommend the Small World, and that's personally because I got stuck on it at the end one time for 20 minutes.
Oh no!
They're all singing at once.
Oh, that does not sound fun.
I can't get away from that. I'm trying to think of other spots because it's been a minute since I've been to the Magic Kingdom for fun. Hollywood.
Oh no, I meant anywhere in any of the parks.
In any of the parks, all of them.
While you're thinking, so one of the times we went to Disney, we so happened to be going to a wedding in Florida, and we were like an hour or 2 hours from Orlando, and we thought, you know what, we'll just go to Disney for a couple of days and make that part of this trip. And at the time, Declan was like, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, maybe probably even less than that, actually. I think he was like 8 months old, come to think of it. And, you know, if you ever end up becoming a parent, there seem to be two basic styles of parenting, particularly of very, very small children. There's the sleep rules our lives, and we will do anything to keep the sleep schedule intact way of parenting, which is what Aaron and I were. Or there's the whatever way of parenting. And I'm not trying to say that our way is better. You know, there's advantages and disadvantages to both, but we are very much the nap will always happen no matter what kind of parents. And we were in Disney, and we were in, I think it was Magic Kingdom. I forget now, but I needed somewhere to let Declan pass out for a little bit. And so we needed in a pinch to find somewhere that was at least slightly quiet, air conditioned, and kind of in somewhere where I could like sit. And what we ended up doing, and I have a really lovely picture of it. If I remember, I'll send it for the show notes, but I'll probably forget. But I have a picture of me holding up my phone as like just a white noise machine, kind of close to his ear, and we're sitting, him on my chest and me on the floor. We're sitting in the Hall of Presidents, like lobby queue area, because we could go off to the side. Like the Hall of Presidents is not the most popular ride in the world.
It is not.
And we could go off to the side, and yeah, there was music and whatnot, but it was mostly relatively quiet, and it was freezing cold, which is exactly what we needed. And he slept for like 20 minutes on my chest, and I will never forget that moment, because we were like, where do we go? What do we do? Where do we go? What do we do? And I'd forgotten, or maybe I didn't know at the time, that there are like nursery or nursing stations or whatever where you can like, you know, where you can feed a child or you can change their diaper or whatever. And I don't know if that would have worked for a nap, but nevertheless, that's what we ended up doing, was the Hall of Presidents.
That's pretty
and it
smart
worked out
in
all
a
right.
quick pinch. That though did help me. I honestly love a lot of the shows, the stage performances and things. They've got the Little I'm thinking in Hollywood Studios, The Little Mermaid. There's Beauty and the Beast, all that stuff. There's also in Hollywood Studios, I'm blanking on the name of it, but there's this Walt Disney kind of like history museum kind of walk through.
Oh,
Walt's
yes,
life.
yes. I can't think of the name of it either, but yes, I know exactly what you're thinking of.
So as someone who loves history, I find that incredibly fascinating. But they also have, you know, Walt's desk, like just things from his life, and he's a person. You cannot deny the impact that what he, clearly you can't deny his impact. And I think that's so important to, like we talked earlier, just preserving things. And I think for famous people and places and things, that's a bit easier to wrap your head around, because museums have been a thing for forever. And art and preserving those things is just a part of it. And seeing how the parks grew and expanded, and his vision for, Disneyland and what would become Disney World, all that stuff's super cool. I'm also incredibly partial to Mexico in Epcot.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because my grandfather, my mom's dad, he actually helped build it.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
oh, that's awesome.
So kind of full circle in the family tree, I guess, coming back to work for Disney. But every time I see that, I think of him. He passed away when my mom was like a teenager, so I never actually knew him. But I don't know. I feel some connection there. And if you go inside, that's where they have this Phineas and Ferb, Perry's Adventure type thing. So they have this kind of hunt Perry the Platypus down thing through Epcot, where you go to different parts of the park to find Perry. And there's little things that pop up and you interact with, and I believe it's in an app now. So you get kind of this almost treasure hunt to find Perry throughout the park. So that gets you to explore and things. I find that makes it feel a little bit more magical and just real, because it's something you don't expect to see a little platypus man with a fedora pop up.
That's super cool. I hadn't tried that. All right. My final question for you, and I will answer it after I ask it to give you a chance to think. What are some of your favorite eateries? And they can be counter service, they can be sit down, whatever you prefer. But I'm curious what some of your favorite eateries are. So for me, I didn't go when we were there with Declan, but I always loved the 50s Primetime Cafe in Hollywood Studios. I always thought that was super fun. I forget where they are. No, one of what is it? Woody's Lunchbox, I think it is, in Hollywood Studios. The tot shows there were absurdly delicious, and I could eat them every day. And then in Magic Kingdom, similar tater tot based thing. Apparently, that's the key to my heart. In the Magic Kingdom, there's the Friar's Nook, where they do a couple of like tater tot based dishes, which I thought were delicious. And then for Aaron and I's honeymoon, our kind of last supper at Disney, if you will, was at the Coral Reef. And so that will always and forever have a special place in my heart. And we did go there with Declan. He did not particularly care for it, which was just absolutely depressing because we love it so darn much. He was mostly unamused by it, and that was really too bad, but it will always be special for me. But any places that you particularly enjoy, like are you a humongous Dole Whip fan, or are there other eateries that you really like?
So pineapple's not really my thing, so I've never done.
Yeah, me neither.
I've been in the Dole Whip scene, but really quick, two things that you reminded me of. You guys honeymooned at Disney World. We didn't do it at Disney World, but we did do a Disney cruise for our honeymoon.
Oh, nice, nice.
So if you can ever do one of those when everything is back,
it's on the list.
Yep. I cannot recommend it enough. Not only as adults who didn't have children, because honestly, it felt like we never, some adults, when they go on a cruise, they go on a cruise because they want to relax and drink and, have all sorts of fun in the sun. And some people may look at kids as kind of a nuisance. I don't look at it that way. I actually had fun with it. They did this little baby race that was super cute. So we were totally cool with it. And a Disney cruise is obviously like the place you want to take kids because it's Disney out on the water. And so that was super fun. But also when we wanted to do something as an adult, we could. And there was, I'm sure there were things to like where you could take your kids and they would be attended to by cast members. But anyway, long story short, we did a Disney cruise. So highly recommend that. And then also your Toy Story thing, they are working on a barbecue, Toy Story barbecue place. It's called,
oh my,
what is, I pulled it up to make sure it was officially announced. Woody's Roundup Rodeo Barbecue. So they're building it over there in Toy Story Land. So
this is like my favorite style of food.
I've heard you talk about barbecue
I love barbecue so much. This is right up my alley. I am already excited.
So that when you get the tater tots from the lunchbox, you can go over and get barbecue at the Roundup.
I'm there.
As far as what I like to eat, maybe this is a cop out, but down at Disney Springs, or what used to be Downtown Disney, there's a sushi place. It's called Morimoto Sushi.
Oh, what's it called?
Morimoto.
Okay. Yep.
Oh my goodness, we
I bet that's delicious. I've never been, but I bet that's tremendous.
It's so good. We love our sushi in the parks, though. We did do Bell's Castle. That was one of when our passes were getting to wind down. That was like a dinner that we did. We made reservations and did that. That's awesome because you get to go in and you're in like the great hall. If you've seen Beauty and the Beast, where they dance and stuff, but you can go into different rooms. So it's weird, but they actively encourage you to like get up and walk around a restaurant, while you wait for your food to come or whatever. And you can walk in and you can be in like beast quarters and there's thunder and lightning and you can see the rose in the glass, or you can go over to some other smaller hall where there's these big statues of Belle and the Beast and they're spinning and dancing. It's really one of those super cool and immersive. And we went around Christmas time, which is a big part of Beauty and the Beast, kind of, I guess, as a whole on a brand type thing. So there was snow and Christmas trees. It's just beautiful, and you're all wrapped. It's Bell's Castle is a great place to go.
It's funny. Is that the same as Be Our Guest, or is that different?
Same thing, yes. So Be Our Guest, yes.
Oh, okay.
That's the official name.
Okay, gotcha. Because when Aaron, let me back up a half step. In February of last year, so like right before the world ended, Aaron did the Princess 5K. I think that's right. Whatever race.
Yeah,
was
they have
in
a ton of races. Yeah.
Yeah, and she and her friend who were down there went to be our guest for lunch, and she said she was actually underwhelmed by it, but that was lunch. And my understanding is dinner is a very, very different adventure entirely. But yeah, I'd like to try that. I'd like to try that sometime.
Usually they do most places, like sit down places, up more for dinner than for lunch, which is understandable, I suppose.
I went to what is it? Where do you get the Lefroux's brew? There's like some counter service place over there.
It's in the back by Ariel's Grotto kind of area.
Yes. Yeah, and everyone was raving about like Lefroux's brew and like the cinnamon bun or whatever was over there. And I tried those, and I actually was underwhelmed by those as well. I was very, very surprised that I didn't love it because I love a cinnamon bun. I think it was a cinnamon bun. Maybe I have that wrong, but the Lefroux's brew was like okay, and the cinnamon bun I felt was way overrated, which was super disappointing because I was really looking forward to it. But it was made up for by the what was it, like a spring roll cart that was near Cinderella's castle heading into like Frontierland or something like that. I forget exactly where it was, but that was really good. And some people had told me to try that out, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I'm you're saying all this, and I'm thinking of like I'm walking through the park, like laying it all out in my mind. That's how I
see.
I'm a like landmark navigator, so when you say here and there, I'm like, okay, I'm here now. Turn.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny how a place that I've only been, I don't know, 10 times in my life. I don't know it extremely well, but I know it a lot more than you would think for having only been there like 10 times. And golly, I can't wait to go back.
I can't wait to go back personally as well, because part of being a cast member is we can opt in to have a pass, or now they offer Disney Plus as an alternative. So we bought the 3-year thing for Disney Plus, so we didn't quite need that. And understandably, they're blocked out cast members, so that all of the attendance that is in the park now is paying guests, and that makes sense from a business perspective. But sure. I can't wait to go back as a guest and just soak up these parks again and get to go and things like that. It's obviously one of Abby and I's favorite things to do together as a couple, and I love going with friends and sharing it with people. And there is an added side of it of being able to say, I worked on that. Yep. That just feel
absolutely.
You take I didn't design the attraction. I play a very small part in a much larger machine. Makes it sound cold, but I play a small part in a much bigger thing, and it's just, there's pride in that, and it feels cool to say I work at Disney and help out with that. I love if I see little kids or little girls in particular in dresses, they're dressed up as their favorite princess, or kids, and I get to say that I work with Mickey Mouse, or I saw Ariel, and their faces just light up in this like it is one of the most heartwarming feelings in the world. And these are strangers to me, and I approach it very respectfully. Their parents are obviously there and everything, but it's just seeing their faces light up, or the way they tuck behind their parents' leg. I'm just, trying to say, I saw Ariel today, or I know a kid is going, and I can say, well, I'll tell them to look out for you, and all this stuff. It is it's one of my favorite parts of the job, and all I do is write a manual.
Yeah, but still, it counts, and that's got to be the best. Yeah, Aaron and I have joked, or at least I think we're joking. I'm not sure if we're joking, but we've joked that whenever it's time to retire, rather than just sitting around and watching TV all day, maybe we'll move down to Orlando. And I've told her that I'll train to be a monorail pilot, which I know is like a very intense thing that requires quite a bit of work and moving up the ladder. But hopefully I can be like a monorail pilot. I can't remember what it was she said she would want to do, but nevertheless, that we would retire by going and working like 10, 20 hours a week at Disney World or something like that. We'll see.
It's pretty cool.
I'm very jealous.
So thank you so much, Casey, for joining me. I've had an absolute blast talking with you this evening.
Oh, ditto. No, absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure, and certainly anytime you want to talk about F1 or drones or certainly Disney World, you know where to find me. So
I do.
Let me know.
I definitely do. At this part, I just want to say, plug away, please.
Right. Yeah. So I'm supposed to do that thing, huh? So you can find me on the internet at caseyliss.com. You can find me on Twitter at caseyliss, Instagram there as well. If you want to listen to my shows, you can find myself and my good buddies, John and Marco at ATP.fm, where we talk about Apple and related technologies. And then you can find me and my good buddy, Mike Hurley, over at relay.fm/analog, where ostensibly we're talking about where our digital worlds intersect with our real worlds, but really it's just kind of been, it's devolved into the two of us just talking to each other, which is the world's worst elevator pitch, but it's actually a pretty enjoyable show. So I encourage you to check that out. But thank you again, Max, for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
As someone who listens to both of those shows, I highly encourage you to listen to them as well if you have not. They're an absolute treat. There have been, being able to listen to ATP specifically for the past 2 years, every week, there have been some moments that are just perfection. When the Mac Pro was announced and then John bought it, was one of the best car drives ever. Just
yep.
Everyone, it's great. I've never been so excited for someone to spend an obscene amount of money.
A whole pile of money. Yeah, a whole pile of money. Yeah, ATP, actually both shows really are shows that the elevator pitch, I think, only captures but the smallest tip of the iceberg. And I like to think anyway that there's so much depth to both of them that you don't really get to hear in the 5-second elevator pitch. But if you like nerdy stuff, then try out ATP. And if you like nerds talking about just about anything, including F1,
yes,
try out Analog.
Yeah, I still sing the theme song every week. ATP. So thank you again, Casey, and thank you all for listening. If you'd like to see any of my work, you can, you're in the podcast feed already. You can check out the rest of these episodes. You can find my writing at maxfrequency.net. And if you're interested in the history of Naughty Dog at all, you can go to chasingthestick.com. Just redirects to Max Frequency, this big history I wrote about Naughty Dog during the PS4 era. You can also listen to that as a podcast, Chasing the Stick. And follow me for more stuff on that coming up, hopefully relatively soon. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you all next time. Bye. Also, I'll edit this out. I want to tell you this because it's funny. At a moment there, I was waiting for you to wrap up because I'm so used to hearing you talk. And I forgot that I'm the host here and I need to wrap the show up.
Yeah, that's quite all right.
I'm so sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all.